Sunday after Epiphany. On Wednesday, we immerse ourselves into the joyful but solemn austerity of Lent. And during those 40 days, we will recount once again and walk the way of the joyous but somber way of the cross. And we do that so that we might better understand both the power and the glory of Christ's resurrection. Today, you might think of as a liturgical segue to that holy season. We, along with Lutherans and other Protestant bodies, always hear this story from the Gospel of Jesus' Transfiguration on the last Sunday after the Epiphany. Now, anybody remember what the word Epiphany means? Enlightenment, more specifically, manifestation, a making known. And during this season of Epiphany, we have contemplated how Christ was made known to the Gentiles, in other words, to the wise men as a little baby, how he was made known at his baptism by John in the River Jordan, and by numerous miracles, especially of healing, throughout his ministry. Today, we hear this story of how his mission and special relationship with the Creator was made known to three of his most intimate disciples on a lonely mountain. So clearly, the Transfiguration is an epiphany, a making known of Christ's inherent divinity. And yet, when it's told in the gospel story, context of the Gospels, it serves another purpose as well. It's not just an epiphany of Jesus' divinity, but it is an epiphany of his passion. Because it happens right as he is setting his face towards Jerusalem to go there and to suffer and to die. And that is why we always hear it on this last Sunday after Epiphany. We are getting ready for Lent. Now, what does the story say? It says, 6 days later, and I always love to start a story like that. Later than what? Well, let me tell you. 6 days after, and this just reiterates that context we're talking about, 6 days after Jesus said, "Whoever would come after me must take up their cross and follow me." 6 days after that, he takes with him Peter, James, and John and leads them up a high mountain apart by themselves. Now, each of the gospel writers tell the story a little bit differently. And just in case anybody's wondering, why did they go apart by themselves? What would they be doing that? We heard it from Mark. Luke leaves no doubt of why. Any guesses as to why they went apart up on a mountain? To pray, he says, to pray. And I don't think that's just a little throwaway, dramatic setting of the stage. I think it's integral to what happens next. It is as Jesus is praying that his appearance is altered. Quiet time, steeped in prayer, is at the heart of this miraculous event. Prayer is the medium of Jesus' transfiguration, and it is the medium of ours. I can't swear to it, but I think it was C.S. Lewis who, when challenged by an agnostic friend of his, who sarcastically said, "Come on, do you really think that your petty little prayers can alter the mind of the omnipotent God of the universe?" replied, "Oh no, my prayers don't change God, they change me." If we want to allow God to change us, to gloriously transform us, if we ourselves want to be transfigured this Lent, then we have got to make room and time for prayer. It changes us. And not only does prayer change us, but it also readies us. You know, so often it's only in times of crisis that we really, really pray earnestly. When we've lost a job or a loved one, or we feel down and out, then we get on our knees in fervent prayer, and we sort of wonder why it feels so awkward. Jesus didn't wait till he was hanging on the cross to pray. In fact, you remember we're told that the night before that great terrible day, he spent hours in the Garden of Gethsemane in deep prayer. And then back it up even further to the gospel we just heard. Before he even gets to Jerusalem, he takes his closest friends, goes apart, and prepares himself and them in prayer, readies them. So Lent is a time for us to ready ourselves in prayer. And what better image to carry with us into Lent than Jesus on the mountain praying? As we attempt to, in small ways, restructure our lives during Lent, some of us still do that, I hope that first and foremost in our minds will be prayer. Because prayer needs to be the source of any giving up for Lent that we do, any taking on that we do, any of our fasting, any of our works of mercy. Now, oftentimes people will confide in me rather sheepishly that they're just not, they don't know how to pray. And I even have clergy friends that say, I'm just not very good at prayer. Well, let me tell you something. It's a simple recipe, in my opinion. It's got 2 ingredients. Only 2. Talking to God and listening to God. So if we open ourselves up to God and share our thankfulness for blessing, our sorrow for sin, our compassion for others, our acknowledgement of dependence, and our sheer joy in the love that we see in God's creation, and if we open our minds in quiet stillness so that we might hear something that God has to say to us, we are praying. It's that simple. It does, in fact, when people say that to me, it's not that they don't know how to pray, it's they don't think they know how to pray like they're supposed to. But the truth is, each and every one of us have unique and varied ways of prayer known only to us. And that's wonderful. But at the same time, there's a rich heritage of prayer in the church. And that's what our parish tries to share during Lent. Some extra tools and devotions to help us deepen our prayer. No one is expected to partake of them all, but they are there for our use. Things like what? Well, I mentioned in the announcements, the sacrament of reconciliation, saying to another living being the things that we are sorry for and hearing them pronounce God's absolution, God's forgiveness. On Wednesday, worshiping at the beginning of this holy season. And then at the end of the holy season, we have opportunity almost every night, every day of Holy Week to worship. And speaking of worship, it's not everyone's practice to worship every Sunday in the church. And some of you do that, some of you don't. And we're all one family together. But if it's not a part of your practice, you may consider that for Lent. It's not forever. See if worshiping with the community of faith, Sunday by Sunday, deepens your prayer. Wednesday nights before our study, our fun study on the saints, we'll have the meditation labyrinth here in the church for your use. I've written an article about that in the Forerunner, how to use that as a meditation tool. On Fridays in Lent, a number of us gather here at noon to walk the way of the cross, the stations. But now, if none of these tools cut it for you, They're just not your thing. And if this whole prayer thing is, yeah, I don't get it, Father Robert. Find somebody to talk to about it. A clergy person or a lay person whom you feel is steeped in prayer. That's what we're here for. As a community, we are called to pray with one another and for one another, and in the process, deepen and learn more about our own life of prayer. And just like everything in life, if we wanted prayer to feel like second nature, well, the only way to do that is to pray deliberately and to pray often. That's the only way to make anything seem like second nature. And so I commend you as we ruminate on this transfiguration of Christ on this last Sunday after Epiphany. Let us enter into Jesus' prayer. As we enter into this holy season of Lent, let us examine our own prayer and ask how we might deepen it. And let us not pray with a mind to change God, but with a willingness to be gloriously transformed ourselves with the radiance of divine love that we have seen in the face of Jesus.